My next question is about different trends, right? Mike, you mentioned that there was this skepticism about participation of new space companies, right? A few years ago. I remember that about 10 years ago, when people talk about commercial utilization of capabilities in the low Earth orbit, it was the same thing. Right? Now we hear this idea of a cislunar economy. To what extent do you think that cislunar economy is still something that is too far away, or is something that we should be preparing ourselves now because there are opportunities to be harnessed?
So were you talking about the moon or cislunar space between here and the moon, or?
I think that includes also the moon, but we're mostly talking about the space in between.
Yeah. Well, I think the moon, in my opinion, is our next place to go. Even though we've already gone there, I think it's the timing now, 50 years later. To me, it reminds me of, not that I was around back then, but polar exploration at the turn of from the 19th to the 20th century, where everyone was rushing to the poles, trying to get there first, and some countries did, and then they kind of, the exploration there sort of waned after they got there first, right? And then 50 years later, they started setting up on in the South Pole, they started setting up a station, a research station, and started to do research, and people started to live there, and to coming in and out of there as researchers and so on. So it took about 50 years to get that set up, from the time that they first reached the pole until they were able to set something up. And to me, it's kind of like the same thing now with the moon, where it's been 50 years since we've sent Apollo 8 there, that we're going to celebrate that in December. Apollo 11 this summer, it'll be 49 years since that happened. And so it's been a while since we've been to the moon, and I think now with what we have going, particularly with these private companies and their interest in maybe going there, I think the moon is going to be, or should be, our next spot to go to and settle, and then from there I think it would be a good way to figure out how to live on a planet, and then go to Mars. I think if we go to Mars, it's going to be a visit. It's a long way to go just for a visit. So I think we'll actually do, in my opinion, I think the moon is where we should go. I think it's so much closer. It's not just in being able to reach it with a rocket, but also the communication between whoever's there, the crew or the entrepreneurs, whoever sets foot there, getting help from the ground for different problems that they will need. I think that it's a quick time delay compared to the Mars, where Mars, you'll say, Houston, we have a problem, and about a half hour later or so, you'll hear a response, and it'll be like, say again, we didn't quite catch it. So I think the moon is now within our grasp, not only to reach it, but to actually settle there.
So just clarification, Mike. You're saying that you wouldn't go to Mars on a one-way ticket?
I don't think anyone should go anywhere on a one-way ticket, because if you're signing up for that, I wouldn't want to go with anyone who and not so much me, but I wouldn't want to go with anyone else who didn't want to come back. What are they hiding? And when I went to space, we got, it's a government operation, so we got travel orders, right? Everywhere we go, if we would go somewhere as an astronaut, we're going to go give a talk in New York, or we're going to go do some training somewhere. You would get these travel orders. It would say, from Johnson Space Center, Houston, Texas, to Albuquerque, New Mexico, for whatever meeting, and return, right? And they would give you all your information. So sure enough, I'm getting ready to launch into space, and the secretary comes by, says, "Here you go. Here's your travel orders." And I look at this, and it says from Kennedy Space Center, Florida, to low Earth orbit, end return. So I was very happy to see the end return there, that the intent was to bring me home. So yeah, and I don't like the idea of the one-way trip. I think you want to come home.
Pretty good. So Will, do you share the same optimism about having the moon as the next destination for economic activities?
Not only do I share the optimism, but I see a lot of activity that is building towards it on a global basis. You can look at the space programs in Israel, in other countries in the Gulf region, as well as those being sponsored by some of the notable entrepreneurs that were named earlier. And you see this either personal ambition or national ambition to put people in place on the moon for a long period of time. And I feel like as a global community, we are building up to a next big push that will establish some permanent capabilities on the moon, and we will enjoy all of the dividends commercially and industrially and societally that occurred with the first great wave in the 60s and 70s.
Sana, so we're talking backstage that one of the good problems that you're having now that you're working so many deals. If somebody approached you with an idea related to the moon, how would you react?
Well, gosh, you keep throwing these wingers at me. Well, I guess I'd want to know more about the idea and hear, why you wanted to go to the moon, what you actually wanted to do there, what was, we haven't come across any company that's sort of proposed to us that they have a strategy for that. So do you have anything more specific that you could ask me?
Sure. No, there's a lot of talk about the moon village, right?
Oh.
And some companies are even ULA said that they would buy fuel for the company that would be able to extract water from the moon. So I think there are these businesses that are emerging out of these opportunities, but just wondering to what extent there's an appetite from your side.
Yeah, I think there's an appetite. Frankly, I think from a Lockheed perspective, we want to know what gets you there and what are the different pieces that can help enable that and accelerate that. In terms of cataloging what's on the moon, being able to use those resources, there's the whole sort of data analytics element here. I know blockchain gets thrown around a lot. That's an area that we're exploring. How you sort of catalog space assets in general is of interest to us. I think that's sort of the limit to our experience in that arena.
Good.